Brad Loncar is back. He's a CEO at Loncar Investments. Brad, IBB's finally been taken off. Biotech as a whole, let's start there because the macro move's been pretty impressive. Is it just a bunch of good stories adding up? Is there some kind of macro theme going on?
No, definitely. So first of all, always great to talk biotech with you, Oliver, on TD at Ameritrade Network. So biotech really started to take off in October of last year. So October through the end of the year, we were up 24%. And a lot of that was deals. Novartis bought a company called Medicines Company. Sanofi bought a small company called Synthorax. And when deals happen, people get excited. So JPM, the conference that I'm at here in San Francisco right now, really kicks off biotech's year. And I have to tell you, I was a little nervous going into it because things had run up so much and expectations were so high. I'm actually glad we're talking today on Wednesday instead of Monday because there's been good news this year, but there hasn't been blockbuster news at this JPM. Like last year, Bristol announced the Celgene deal a few days before. Lilly bought, did a multi-billion dollar deal with a company called Loxo. And those types of things have been missing, but there's been good news. And I think we'll talk about some of those things. So maybe not the headline grabbing things of the past, but biotech sector is, on a good speed. It all comes down to this great science that's happening right now.
All right, so maybe some of the mega deals, got done, and maybe the flow is a little bit slower for those right now. Let's talk the deal today real quick. Is there anything to do, with this phase 1 thing in China or future deals with China that might affect biotech? I know one of the names on your list is related to China biotech, ZLAB, ZLAB, Zai.
Yeah, ZLAB. So there was a big deal recently. Another Chinese company called BeiGene struck a huge partnership with Amgen. Amgen bought 20% of BeiGene, and that really opened people's eyes, I think, to what's going on in China. If a company is sophisticated and one that already has the global reach of Amgen is striking a huge commercialization partnership with the Chinese company, what's going on there? So I put BeiGene and ZLAB on the same first-class level. These are world-class companies, and man, I'll bet ZLAB is having meeting after meeting at this conference, just hearing from companies that are looking to partner with them. They've already got a lot of great partnerships, but just all the fervor that's going on in China right now is really benefiting companies like this, and they're in a great position to take the drugs that we've been excited about here and to commercialize them there. So they really, other than announcing a new director, Lonnie Mulder, who ran a great company called Tesoro, other than that news, they didn't have any big announcement, but I think they're just on people's radars because it's such an important theme this year.
Let's talk one of the themes that you see at the conference right now, allogenic cell therapy. I know a couple companies here on your radar. There's basically, it seems like there's kind of a theme that goes through every year. Last year, a lot of it was focused on oncology, of course, blood and hematology as well. Brad, what are the big themes here this time around?
Yeah, so I know you and your viewers will remember CAR-T. That's using your own cells to treat cancer. Well, version 2.0 of that is allogeneic, which is using cells instead of from the patient, from a donor. And there's a lot of talk, as I have meetings here at the conference, that's a major thing that we're all talking about. I want to know in 2020, is there going to be an aha moment from allo data? Just like we saw from CAR-T a few years ago, you saw, a very high cure rate and you're like, wow, I get this. So far, we haven't seen it from allo because to use these donor-derived cells, there's a lot of hurdles in biology that you have to get over. You have to make sure the patient's body accepts them and that the cells persist. So there's some technical challenges to making this version 2.0 of CAR-T work, but there's a lot of companies working on it. Fate Therapeutics has been a stock that's been running these last couple days, just like ZLAB. I think it's just because this is a theme that's being talked about. But there's 5 or 6 allogeneic cell therapy companies that will have data throughout the rest of this year. So I'm going to be watching, will that aha moment present itself this year?
Now, will these companies be subsumed by the larger biotechs like we've seen before? Is this method of treatment and research right now one that can be easily overlapped with companies with existing oncology programs that are using T-cell styles?
I think so, because one of the drawbacks of the current CAR T is because you use the patient's own cells, it's very logistically challenging and very expensive. You have to draw blood, ship them to the company, engineer them, and it's all, a lot of work. Well, because you're using donor-derived cells, you can do all of that in advance. And we have a term, we say it's these therapies will be off the shelf, meaning when you diagnose the patient and they need the drug's already sitting on the shelf at the oncologist's office. And so larger companies, don't really want to deal with the mess of all those logistics. Gilead bought Kite a few years ago, and they've been dealing with that, and it's turned into kind of a sour deal. But if this technology works, without a doubt, because it's more of like a traditional, biologics in a bottle type drug. So without a doubt, if these smaller companies can get the technology to work, it's going to draw a lot of interest from bigger companies.
One that's been on the move that I think more people do recognize, Brad, $17 billion Insight, had this huge monster rally, then undid like all of it. So here we are again looking at this situation for these companies. How do we make sense of the volatility? Good news that maybe is not as good as people thought, or what?
Yeah, they had a clinical trial setback right around the end of the year in 2019, and they actually were part of what I thought was the biggest news of JPM 20. So they struck a deal with a company, MorphoSys, which is European, but it actually trades on the NASDAQ. And they're going to help MorphoSys commercialize what's called an anti-CD19 antibody for a type of cancer called diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. And so they're paying MorphoSys $750 million up front. They're doing a $150 million equity deal. And that's the most money I saw out of all the press releases so far at the conference this week. And I think it's a good sign that because they've had some of their own pipeline setbacks, I think Insight Management gets it. And so they're starting to get active with, what we call business development. So bringing new things in, helping companies like this commercialize things. So, not relying only on their own pipeline, trying to get creative to have some more avenues for revenue growth. So I think it's good for them. I think it's good for MorphoSys too. This is really the first drug that they're commercializing in the United States on their own. They usually help other companies develop drugs, and usually when you get your first drug across the finish line, and it's actually in front of FDA right now, so it's not fully approved. We'll have to see how it goes, but I think it's looking pretty good. If they get that approval, oftentimes the first drug approval is like an inflection point. So I'd watch that. And, one thing I'd say about the conference, we had such high expectations, again, going into this. I was worried that a lot of companies were valued for buyouts because we're always looking for buyouts. And so this MorphoSys thing, it was a great deal. They got a ton of cash from Insight, couldn't have been a better deal. And the stock actually traded down, which is kind of the story of a lot of stocks on Monday that didn't get their buyouts. But it was really good news, and I think it's good for both companies. And actually, Biotech as a whole, we had we felt kind of let down on Monday, and stocks traded down significantly while the stock market was strong. But yesterday and today, Biotech's bounced right back, and now we're green for JP Morgan. So we still have one day of the conference left, fingers crossed, but I think it's a sign that Biotech's on a good path for the year ahead. I'm excited about what the next year has in store for our sector. And
we're just talking some of the smaller names here. Before we let you go, Brad, just real quick, BMY and Eli Lilly. We can't have this discussion without a quick mention. I mean, Eli Lilly is the most overbought stock in the market according to RSI, and BMY has now totally turned its fortunes on its head since the last you and I spoke, apparently.
Yeah. I have mixed feelings. So, I'm a big oncology, so cancer person, and Lilly recently did a very smart thing. So when they bought a company last year at this time, Loxo, they just announced that the leaders of Loxo are going to stay at Lilly and run their oncology programs. And they're really smart people. And so I think it's going to really, get Lilly back into potentially a leadership role in oncology. So I don't know about the stock price. I don't give, stock advice, but I do think that was a smart business move. And, oncology is the most important space in our sector right now. Bristol, I'm a little skeptical. So the Celgene deal just closed. I was a critic of that deal for full disclosure. And, the things that they bought Celgene for, they highlighted, 5 or so pipeline assets are still yet to be seen. Like the final verdict on whether that was a good acquisition or not has not been written yet. We won't know that for 2 or 3 years. But they do just, you got to give them credit in the short term. I mean, it's been a monster stock. And so, credit to them. And, this is the first conference they've been at where that integration has happened. It was just approved by the FTC. And so now they're really a solid tumor and a blood cancer company. And they're also getting into this cell therapy CAR T space. And so we'll have to watch and, see how their progress tracks now that they are a much bigger company.
Stock is on the move. Brad Loncar on the move to the conferences too. Appreciate you joining us in the walkthrough. Pleasure as always. Brad's the CEO at Loncar Investments.